The next fly we're going to tie is a sparkle dun. And so similar to the earlier flies, we're going to go ahead and pinch down the barb, basically for safety purposes. Plus it makes it a little faster to release the fish if we're going to put it back, and definitely easier to remove the hook if we catch ourselves. And I like to do that before tying the fly. Just makes it something that if we happen to break the hook, it's better to do it before we invest the time tying the fly. And so I've got the hook shank, which is the flat part of the hook from the eye back to where the bend starts, roughly parallel to the tabletop. And then we're going to attach the thread by spiral wrapping forward, I don't know, 3 to 6 times, and then spiral wrapping back over the top of it. If you want to put some extra wraps on there, that doesn't hurt anything. But you see very easily we've got the thread attached, and then we can take this extra piece of thread right here that's called the tag end, and then we can cut that off. And what I like to do is let out a little bit of thread. I like to work with about 1 inch of thread outside of the bobbin, so that way I can advance the thread towards the bend of the hook or back up to the eye, laying down a base layer of thread just by rotating my wrist a little bit. And so that way I'm not using a whole lot of excessive motion, plus working with the shorter distance of thread makes it easier to control the thread placement. And so for adding the tail on to this fly, what we're going to do is use a shuck of olive green antron. And I'm just cutting it down a little bit to make it an easier length to handle. But this piece of antron yarn has more fibers in it than what we're going to need. I kind of like to have something that is in the range of 8 to maybe 16 or so individual fibers. And what we're going to do with that is kind of stroke this back together, and then to work with that, we're going to even up the tips of that just by cutting all of the unruly fibers at the end. And what we're going to do then is measure this. We want it to be about the same length as the hook shank. And so we've got that fairly close, so I'm going to transfer that to my other hand, set this on top of the hook, and then make a couple of loose wraps just to get everything positioned well. And if we do this with the loose wraps, and I don't know if you noticed that, but what I'm doing is I'm bringing this up, I'm catching the thread between my thumb and finger and then pulling straight down, and that helps keep the excess yarn from wanting to rotate in front of that tie down point. And since if I use my scissors to measure the length from here to here, and right there is a little bit longer, I could either pull the yarn forward and then tie it down, or I'm going to go ahead and create a nice little base here and do it the easy way. And since it's yarn, we can go ahead and cut it with the scissors and be back to the right length. So I'm just putting that wrap of thread on there. Now I'm going to measure the length of the body here, come back there. I need to trim just about that much, and now the shuck is the right length for the fly. And then I'll trim off this material up here, and we're going to go ahead and we'll move forward to approximately 1/3 of the way here, and we're going to tie in the wing, and we'll add the body back afterwards to help cover up the butts of the deer hair that we're going to use. So what we're going to do is take a clump of deer hair and that might be a little bit more than what I really need, but I'm going to clean that and stack it, and then we'll see how much we have left. And so if you take this and you grasp it by the tips, and then you pull on the bottom, you'll take out some of the shorter hairs. It also gets rid of some of the under fur, and that looks pretty decent for getting rid of the under fur. Now that we've done that, we're going to take that, and what I'm doing is kind of making sure all the tips are inside the barrel before I let them go, and then we'll tap on the surface of the table to even them up, and then we're going to spin this a little bit, and we've got the tips nicely even right there, and so we'll set this aside. I'm going to bring this back, and we're going to measure the length of the hair against the hook shank, and so that was a little bit longer than what the shank of the hook is, so I have to move my grip forward just a bit. Now that's looking pretty good, and I'm going to bring the thread back to about 1/3 of the distance back from the eye of the hook. Then I'm going to set this clump here and make a couple of very loose wraps and stuff to help lock that down. Now I'm going to start applying tension to the thread and moving back closer to the tail of the fly, and that actually locks that down. And I'm going to lift up the butts, and I'm going to cut those at an angle. And that will help us make a tapered shape. And if you're lucky, you could do this all in one, but I had some of the butts of the deer hair that got down and was trying to mix with the shuck that we tied earlier, and so I wanted to very carefully make sure we'd gotten those out of the way before we continue. There's still one or two of them that are right there, and we'll get that out of there momentarily. There we go. We'll just slide the scissor down, and now what we're going to do is use the thread, and we'll actually try and trap those little bits and pieces of the hair that are left as we're going down. Now I'm going to bring this underneath that shuck and back up over the top, and that locked all of that stuff in place. We'll cut that extra little piece, and I'm going to use my thumbnail to push up the wing and just bend it upright. And when we get a little closer, we'll come and we'll put some thread wraps in front of that. But in the meantime, we want to take a little bit of the olive dubbing for the body, and we're going to create a tapered body up over the cut butt ends of the hair, and make sure everything is a nice olive color. So you see how we're taking very small amounts of fiber and teasing those out of the clump, and then twisting them onto the thread, and we're doing this so it's very thin, and we can keep adding more to it if we need. And what we're going to do is take that thread now and use that to wrap forward to create a nice abdomen for the fly. And I'm going to set down the rest of that. I'm going to pull these fibers forward and make a small ball of dubbing right in front of the wings. And then we're going to take these and fan the feathers out, sorry, not feathers, but the individual hairs out, so that it makes a semicircle up and over the top. And that's what's going to support the fly when it's on the water. Now some people will actually intentionally make some additional wraps through these, where they'll work the thread possibly through the middle here and pull back, and then they'll pull this group back and they'll do another wrap that way, and then fan them out. That's all fine. You're going to find that there's different ways that different people will handle that step, and some of them are easier for you as the tyer than others, and this just happens to be the way I like to do it, where I bend the hair back with my fingernail, put a few wraps in front of it with some dubbing, and then get it approximately positioned, and then I'll come back and add just a little bit more dubbing in front of the stack and create the remaining parts of the fly. So pulling those forward and then making a small amount of dubbing in front, which will help hold everything in place. And then I've got room right on the end where I'll take the half hitch tool and I'll make a little wrap, slide that up and over the eye of the hook, and have a knot. And now I'm going to put some double hitches, so I'm taking and making a loop of thread right here behind the eye, 1.5 wraps. The top thread goes over the hook eye, the bottom stays underneath. And that's the double hitch knot that I'm particularly fond of. Other people will use a series of half hitches or a whip finish, and all are okay. You can also put in a little bit of head cement now if you would like. And then what I do is basically move some of the hair fibers and stuff to get it balanced equally on both sides of the fly. And so if you look at that, you see that, we are trying to get them evenly distributed throughout. And then we've got a couple of little hairs that I picked up somewhere along the line that we'll trim. Those are not deer hairs. I think those were something that came in off of my finger when I didn't have the right view. So we'll do a little bit of pruning, blow off the fly, and we've got a very nice finished sparkle done.